Yo, and welcome to an episode of the Product Lab. Obviously, seeing chat has been lighting it up for the last 15 minutes, going back and forth. And I'm super curious where everybody's joining us from today. Chris, I know you're in Maryland, and I am in beautiful hurricane country today. As like the kids are home from school, everything's preparing for rain, flood, everything else. So I think we'll make it though. Florida folks are probably out there with their American flags, yelling like Florida man things.
Yep. No, for sure. For sure they are. Yeah, no, it's no hurricane here, but man, lots of rain for like this whole week.
Nice. And so I'm seeing all kinds of other folks. We've got Cape Cod all the way to the opposite. I'm not sure which Portland we have, whether it's Portland, Maine. We've got some UK hanging with us, etc. Some Sri Lanka. So we're going all kinds of international today, but I appreciate everybody obviously hanging with us. We did some polling before, we started kind of our planning for the actual Product Lab episode. And it turns out a lot of people want to know what's going down with SIEM. So like typical format, we're going to run through all the shady stuff cooking in the lab, especially things that have just recently released. We have listened to your feedback. And those of you who went to feedback.huntress.com, we kind of, went through what are the most common upvotes? What are you looking for? What are we shipping? So massively appreciate that interaction. We'll say today is going to end with a pretty epic call to action, or AMA, ask me anything. So one of the things that we discovered in feedback is a lot of the audience loves being able to chime in with their points, but would love to focus it maybe on one or many things that happen to be all interrelated. And so Chris and I used the feedback from both the polls on LinkedIn and social and discovered that you all want to talk about what shady things are we going to detect. And so Chris and I cooked up an episode today that's going to talk to you about how do we build even detections at Huntress, kind of letting you put your Hunter or Huntress hat on and see the way that we do. We're going to share a little bit of how we're looking at the landscape, things that we're testing, some things that are only just thoughts. And then we're going to turn it over to you. We want to let the audience roast us, light us up, tell us where you've seen good products, kind of win, unleash your spicy thoughts on like where you've seen stuff maybe just be noisy and create you a whole ton of work. But that's where we're going today. You cool with that?
Yeah, and make sure you make sure you get in there and participate, ask questions, throw stuff in chat, because at the end we're going to do another giveaway. And so the way this worked last time is I just kind of looked through and found people who were participating a bit, and then we give them free stuff.
I like it. So in that spirit, Chris, Bruce was talking about Florida when he was saying there's a whole lot of blowing wind. I'm not sure if he's talking about me or the hurricane itself. So with that said, you mind if I maybe, we tend to use these slides not to bore somebody. It's not a sales pitch, just to help move the conversation. You cool with me sharing some content, Chris? And let's roll.
Let's do it.
All right. So here we go. I'm going to do the entire screen setup, and I've already got some of that. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, this is just as casual it gets, just like the intro. We stay that way. If you haven't seen the agenda, it's just what I told you. We're going to give you some primer on to make sure that you understand like how we talk about and kind of the scope of what detections look like when you're hunting across millions of endpoints and millions of identities. It tends to work a little bit different than when you're just in your, like a slightly smaller environment. And then again, gathering your feedback. So Chris, I saw there was all kinds of things going on. One of the ones I was excited about is the team that's doing the identity threat detection and response. So that's like EDR for identities. Last month, they released Unwanted Access. So that's more focused on like VPNs, shady different login locations, people doing not only credential stealing, but actually stealing tokens. And that new stuff they announced that they released last month called Unwanted Access. It was rolled out to everybody for free. It's now 100% rolled out. And it looks like in the last 30 days with that new tech, they have found 4,200 critical M365 incidents. So I know you and I have been saying identity is kind of the new perimeter. Everybody's moving in that direction, but holy smokes. What's your thoughts on this like massive trend of M365 incidents?
I mean, I knew we were going to catch stuff because, we were focusing on some very specific tradecraft that we knew was out there and that people were doing, but I didn't expect the number to be that big.
I kind of myself was a little bit caught off guard. I knew it was fairly large. And remember, folks, some of these incidents are like more mundane. Hey, somebody fell for the typical phishing or gave their password or reused a password. That's old school credential theft. But what's wild is how many of these 4,200 incidents are actually folks successfully stealing either the SMS and two-factor authentication logins by social engineering or backdooring an app, for instance, and getting that installed. So if you all have appetite in learning like how this crazy new trend is working, like light us up in chat or make sure that we know about it for next month, because we saw about half of you wanted SIM stuff, but maybe a little bit less wanted to know what's this next upcoming trend. So I won't read any more. We're obviously always working to like reduce false positives. You know, sometimes you just have somebody travel. And for those of you who had asked, when we're creating rules for somebody like traveling and doing something shady, we realize people come back from vacation. So some of the things that they're working on rolling out right now are changing and making expirations. So if you know somebody's going to be gone for a week, set them for a week. The rule disappears automatically, or being able to create many rules faster instead of just, you know, a handful of rules at a time. So this is pretty excited. So with that said, I'm seeing Chris already chats throwing out some questions about folks just looking at some of this morning. What's nice, team, is this type of logic that we do, even though this is on the identity threat detection response umbrella, it really is going to be focused on the Microsoft 365 environment and the Google Workspace environment as we start rolling out some of that in 2025. And so, believe it or not, these same great ideas move their way into the SIM side. So we're going to be talking. So Darren, who was just asking about like, what are we going to detect from an on-prem firewall, or what are we detecting? Could you actually find any of this with the SIM? We're going to be talking a little bit about that. And you're going to see a lot of these are going to work together, kind of like a lattice, right? Of where maybe where one thing falls short, the products can complement each other's blind sites. So it's pretty dope, pretty exciting. And I think we'll share more about that probably towards the end of this year, of how products will start collaborating with each other more effectively. All righty, Chris. So I'm ready to roll. I mean, I think there's plenty of this stuff. We know the SAT team, right? They're constantly just shipping all things they can do. That's awareness training, trying to reinvent what awareness training needs to be. For those of you who asked, some of it was just simple questions. Partners saying, help me co-brand. They listened. They shipped your stuff. We also have heard more and more HR departments and IT departments saying, look, we can't motivate people to take training, even if the training's great. But man, we work with some competitive SOBs. So with that said, team is already doing beta testing of the leaderboard stuff. We probably won't go full on out, Duolingo style leaderboard, but it is definitely working its way. We're liking what we're seeing. And this is going to be a major part of where, you know, we're going to probably pivot a lot of awareness training into really tradecraft modules, teaching your employees real tradecraft that's not just limited to here's phishing, here's spam, because if you can engage people to think like hackers, you can prevent hackers. That's always the good. Chris, you want to talk about this one a little bit? This is something that's closer to the platform, but with you being the CTO, this is right up your alley.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've kind of heard from folks a bunch of times is, hey, when you mark an incident in the Huntress platform, when you mark it as completed, can you update my PSA ticket automatically? And so, yes, we can now do that. You can actually go into your integration for your PSA, and you can choose what status you would like us to set it to. Obviously, if you don't choose one, we won't set it. So depending on your workflow, this may or may not work for you, but maybe you have a status in your workflow that's like Huntress remediated. And so you want to be able to have us change it when that happens. And so this will work across the ConnectWise, Auto Task, and a couple of other PSAs. Most of the PSAs that we have, I think this will work. There's like the four major ones that we have. This will all work. So definitely go check that out if that's something that interests you.
Yep. Love it. Love it. So moving, Chris, this is obviously getting towards the heart of today's episode, finding shady stuff with SIM, clarifying what we're going to go, what we're thinking, etc. Do you want to start diving in, getting that tone more SIM focused for the rest of this? Because I think this is an important thing. Like, your team is shipping a lot in 6 weeks. You kind of have done just a little bit. Adoption's going through the roof. Help the folks understand.
Yeah, so shipped a bunch of stuff with SIM. I think the biggest ones that we shipped are the new sources. So pfSense, WatchGuard, Keeper, DNS Filter, The thing with SIEM is it's always sources, right? It's always somebody saying, well, what about this? Can you add that? Can you add this thing? So in addition to those ones that we shipped, we're also working on Cisco Meraki. So today we will parse the Meraki security logs. So you can actually go in and add this today to your SIEM if you have Meraki devices. We'll parse the security logs. The other logs that we get, just kind of like the generic activity or application logs or whatever, we still collect those and store them, but we don't, really parse them out. So we're working on doing more of that. Sophos and Palo Alto firewalls are in the queue and should be hopefully done here in the next 6 weeks or so. We are knee deep in updating our monthly and quarterly reports. So if you're not familiar with these are the reports that we generate every month that you can then take and give to your leadership or give to your end customers and say, hey, here's what we did for you. Here's what you're paying for in your security product. We are updating those with all the SIEM data. So you'll be able to see just how much, how many data sources there are, how many logs came in, and then, soon, hopefully, how many incident reports were based on data that was collected from the SIEM. And then the last thing that we are working on now is the search experience. So we've got a number of requests around, in some cases, simplifying it. So right now it's kind of more an advanced thing. You can specify, I want, if this field is this value or that field. People have asked, like, hey, can I just like type in a word and you can show me all the logs that matched it? So we're working on that, as well as some of the other advanced features to allow you to do ands and ors and counts of things. So all of those will be coming soon. The interesting stuff here is that we've almost tripled the number of partners who are using the SIEM. But if you look at the number, like the volume of data did not triple. And that is, again, because we talked about last month, smart filtering. So we are filtering out a lot of noise, really trying to get close to the data that actually matters.
So, Chris, you got some folks saying kind of what I what I was saying on when I read your release notes of like, holy shit, this is a pretty good pace of development. Keep up the good work and keep up the pace, dude. So obviously not a dull moment. We're going to be running an informal poll, by the way, for some of you who asked about what we're supporting and what we plan to support. We want to gather your feedback. And so if you give us just a little bit, we'll do that live poll. And Chris will share behind the scenes some of the stuff they're already testing and playing with. Some stuff that we even are looking for, like your feedback to help us prioritize. Because remember, the noisiest group on feedback.huntress.com can help shape our roadmap and priority, but the most interactive, usually those of you who are joining us on these live sessions, you're the ones we want to hear the most about why you think a priority should be different. And again, it doesn't take us long to do it, but when you have, oh my God, all the logs to support, it really makes prioritization not even a headache, just an effort. So with that said, we want your opinions on this stuff, but we need to get you spun up to how we think about things when you're talking about a scale that most people never get to see. So, Chris, are you cool with me running this like informally? And then maybe by the time it gets to like the poll, you kind of like own some of that conversation, since this is literally your innovation cell that's doing all this stuff very, very fast.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. Let's wing it that way then. So thinking like Huntress doesn't mean anything special. We're not special by any means. It just means it's a little bit different reality. So one of the realities I want to share with you all, especially because this isn't just about products, right? It's about community and education here. And so it turns out when you do analysis, if you need to do it at a scale that is like potentially near infinitely growing, right? There's obviously an upper bound, but we don't know how large Huntress will get. And so we have to prepare for all hyper growth. And we want to talk to you a little bit about the trouble we're running into with like size of analysis. And we want to share with you of how we've kind of started solving this / did solve it. That way, when you're giving us recommendations a little bit, you can think about, well, what size of analysis? Is this something very small, or is this something closer to an investigation? Next up, there's a lot of surfaces. We want to share with you that volume because, as I kind of alluded to earlier, oh my gosh, there's a lot of logs for SIEM. Some logs you just want to store. Who cares if you do detection on them because they're garbage? To be honest, a lot of firewall logs, now that everything's encrypted, the typical old school, hey, I got a Christmas tree scanner, a SIN scanner, nobody cares anymore. That's called the noise of the internet. So we want to share with you the surfaces to inspect. And next up, the way that we do detection is very unique at Huntress. We're not building a Formula One car where it has a 5-person pit crew to maintain the product, and every single part has to be perfect for everything. We build for the masses, right? Think about the smallest of businesses, the mid-market enterprises, and then those MSPs, MSSPs that support them. Like, you're our actual audience. And it turns out we got to build with not only enterprise grade quality in mind, we got to build with cost in mind. So we want you all to see this way. And so to like dive into it, you probably don't know this, but our internal SOC, we treat them as a SOC as a service, meaning they actually, each product gets charged for how they use the SOC. It's kind of crazy, but it's a business within a business. And so the two things that we do, by the way, and the two like sizes, if you could almost describe this as like t-shirt sizes, you kind of have like a small and a medium in this scope here. Think about a triage and review as like, hey, it's a little bit of data that's very specific to maybe a single event. And I need you to look at it for 30 seconds. The algorithms thought it was this. The scoring thought it was this. All the fancy analysis thought it was this. But I need a human, like a real human trained brain, to give me 30 seconds of analysis on this. And they really choose like one of three things. Yo, this is sus, right? Investigate it. Or, hey, let's mark it as reviewed and dismissed. That's how a lot of our human triage works. And so you can imagine that's that relationship here. Investigation and reporting is more in depth. Notice the 3 minutes. And this has to be available, by the way, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, world-class experts, nobody sleepy on night shift. It's really hard. So in case you've never thought about this, like we really do have like APIs and interfaces for our own SOC as a service. And internally, by the way, some of the people who use these interfaces are the products that you buy, the people that are actually building the products. Sometimes they send things in for triage. And some things they send stuff just straight in, like they have such high confidence. Yo, I need this investigated. Give me 3 minutes, do the full investigation. And the difference is a review might be just a little bit of data, but an investigation might be consider multiple events and maybe even multiple endpoints or multiple identities, or in this case, SIEM, multiple logs. So if you can't tell, I'm trying to shape your brain a little bit on like where we're going with this. We also have another customer that tends to work on this, and the detection engineering teams, these are not people that are writing, one-off detections. These are people doing scalable detections to make sure that your cost of humans stays low. So notice this is a, 8-hour by 5 day a week type people versus the folks that have to be in it hunting all day, every day, etc. So that's a little inside scoop, by the way, of how we do this. Melvin asked, tell me there is a yo, this is sus button. We are just that casual. The culture internally is pretty ridiculous. So although we don't always bring that type of nonsense into our like partner and customer facing dashboards, you best believe internally it is just that ridiculous. So appreciate you all, appreciating that stuff. And by the way, when all these things, no matter what happens, I want you all to know that when we get ready to talk in our AMA, you're going to have these two tools. Hey, maybe we want to do a 30-second review, or maybe we need to do a 3-minute investigation. And remember, usually these things, 3 things happens, sus button. Okay. No, sometimes it's like, no, this is okay. Dismiss. Other times we're like, whoa, we will not have enough info to answer this on our own. We have to reach, whether the internal IT department is there, or it's like an outsourced MSP, MSSP, telco, printer copier dealer. We have to ask you because we just will not know enough, even as your outside SOC. And the last one is, yo, this is so bad, time to create an incident report. So now you know a little bit about our analysis sizes. I'm going to keep this going with the problem that Chris and I, Chris, you and I have been doing this for a long time. We've built a lot of different things. I think on endpoints, you're still handling billions of unique processes per day. It's actually, I think, getting closer to 1 billion an hour that you're looking at of unique processes. Identities, I think last I saw, Chris, that there's over 1 million paying, and maybe the ones that are like service accounts that aren't doing maybe 2 million total identities, and hundreds of thousands of humans for that newer awareness training. But I don't think most folks understand the scale of logs. So I created you the world's jankiest icon this morning, and it's called the super log. Is this not kind of what your team is feeling right now? It's just logs at most scale that people don't realize.
Yeah, for sure. It's a ton of data that's coming in. That's having to get processed, having to get stored. A lot of what the team does is we kind of go back and forth between build some stuff, review the stuff that we built. Like, are there performance changes that need to be made, anything like that? Because there's just so much, right? And it's kind of this never-ending feedback loop. Like, one of the things we're going through right now is like, okay, how much of this firewall data should we be filtering out? Which things, So it's a lot of stuff.
So I don't know if you saw earlier, Chris, it was just a little bit ago. Eric was like, yo, I hear you guys talking about these firewall logs. Like, no matter what brand, these things are the noisiest. And so you can imagine part of our logs is just what do we filter? But even when we decide that something, like a good example of what to filter is something with zero security or incident value. And it's kind of like people underestimate just how much garbage things there are like that. And it turns out when you remove those from the stack, okay, you still have a smaller haystack, but it's much smaller. But when you look at logs on the scale of what we're getting from, like you saw the growth Chris is having on SIEM, we really need to make sure that we can handle this. So Chris, I prepared some janky stuff. So earlier somebody asked, like, are you supporting FortiGate and et cetera? Give me the rundown, Chris. This is like all the icons I saw that I think you're
Yep.
supporting now. Is there anything I'm missing?
No, I mean, I think that's it, right? A bunch of different firewalls. So far, we have LastPass and Keeper on the kind of authentication identity side. Duo is one that is in progress currently. We had a DNS filter, but there's totally more to do there with other DNS services and such. That icon down kind of in the bottom on the right may not be common knowledge. That is Windows Events. That's the event viewer icon. Ubiquity, that is also in the works. So that is one that we had heard a little bit, but I guess just through people, talking and whatnot. When I went to Canny the other day, which is the system that runs feedback.huntress.com, there were 100+ people who had already voted for the Unify products. So that is very quickly making its way up the list of prioritization, and we'll try to get something, pushed out for that here relatively soon. So,
man, so this is awesome being able to get some of this real time. Like I hear, Ubiquity, Unify. One of the things that I want to share is like, just because you get the logs doesn't mean there's something that's actually worth putting human power behind, right? And if you consider like the caliber of the SOC, we're not like most where it's like, some of these people are glorified, well-intended, ethical IT people, but we try to put our powerhouses in the SOC, right? And there's varying levels of SOC skill and SOC analyst that goes behind those two. We call them queues, the triage and review queue, the investigation report queue. And so I appreciate everybody kind of just throwing us a little bit more what's going on there. What I love is the fact that there's not a whole lot of new things that we haven't heard before. That doesn't mean we're getting center mass or all of them, but it means we're probably starting to get the collection stuff wrapped up, moving this quick. And if you can't tell, one of the things Chris and I and team are itching to dive into is what detection. So what? You have logs. That's great for compliance, but tell me something I need to know. Tell me something that's not going to create more work. So Chris, I prepared, and I'll let you dive into the security or the SIM section next about detections. But I wanted people to think about the shapes of detections that we do. So you're going to see my world's best drawing of how I think about these things on a non-technical level. The bank. So, okay, everybody put your thinking hats on right now. Imagine you're trying to secure a bank. And a bank has some form of crown jewels, right, that you're trying to prevent people from stealing. So at Huntress, right, if you were, for instance, going after enterprise customers, you say, I need to detect everything, all the things, use all the AIs, all the machine learning, all the people. And that's, by the way, just how you get to a Formula One car. It's the most expensive high performance machine on the planet. But the analogy we always use internally is most of the world, the 99% of companies that are mid-market enterprises and SMBs, let alone the people that like support and manage them, they need a high-end sports car. It's still fast enough to chase down hackers, right? Think of your Porsche 911, your Lamborghini, your Audi R8, etc. Something like that that's a super fast car, but it's just a different ball game. And the difference is any person can drive those cars I just listed, as opposed you need $1 million driver just to know how to operate a Formula One car. And the part I wanted to throw at you is when you build differently and you purposely don't build for perfection, but you build with what we call compensating controls, this analogy starts to take shape of like, of course, the first thing we want to do is we want to keep sus, shady things out. That's your prevention, right? This is analogous to a lock on the front door. But notice this isn't everything in the bank. It's just trying to keep people out of the bank. And so sometimes, by the way, notice the shape of what we've done is we've drawn a horizontal here that focuses on all the most common ways people try to get initial access. So for instance, remember that ITDR example I gave earlier called unwanted access? That would be like analogous to a lock on the front door. It's trying to prevent people from getting initial access. We know people will still slip by it. That is the beauty of cybersecurity is nobody has perfection, but we always use that. It's about layering. But it turns out you need to layer your shapes differently. So while you might be going and looking at all the different types of detections, things that your antivirus or things that your logs might be missing, etc., you need to understand some of the hackers are going to move in that, MITRE attack framework, and they're going to get past the front door and start doing post exploitation. So the next shape we tend to use at Huntress is kind of like a pressure plate sensitive floor. Right? This is, can you find the footsteps of somebody lurking in, how they're going to lurk long-term, like a foothold, what type of post-exploitation behavior they might do. And again, sometimes you might only decide to make your pressure plate maybe the first 6 feet. You assume, if somebody gets past, I want to know the first 6 feet that they jump, because maybe it's really expensive to find the remaining 20 feet of the bank. Maybe you have that budget. And I'll tell you, we have to decide this on every attack surface we decide to protect. What is the shape of the essentially mechanism we're using to secure? Sometimes you put guards in place, right? And let's be real. Sometimes your guards are more like Paul Blart Mall Cop, right? Anybody who's not familiar with that American movie, it's a gem, aka terrible. So, but sometimes you need it, right? Because just enough for somebody to have some ears looking around, maybe inspecting apps that shouldn't be there, things that notice this is the first time that you start to see multiple levels of overlap where, these have to look. But notice the shape. It doesn't handle the fact that the guard won't see everything. What if somebody slips behind the guard, especially in a 3D world? So by the way, some of the things that we do, while these are all very narrow, only looking at maybe the preventions, only looking at the way people lurk undetected for long periods of time, often called persistence. Other things are more along the lines of maybe it's just looking for very certain cracks, crevices, ears, noise, etc. The part I want to get to is it's not a perfect layered security. So when we're building at Huntress, sometimes the shape of our detection is really big. It looks a lot more like an enterprise data lake. This is kind of the all-seeing eye. Think about this as a camera in the corner of the bank. And this data lake are always our most expensive. And it's also our most ephemeral, meaning you can't store that data forever. And so the reason I'm sharing all these analogies with you is when we get into detection here in a second, we're going to need to think, is this more like, prevention? You always want to have a lock on your door. But camera footage, you might only be able to store camera footage for a certain amount of time. So Chris, like you were the one who built the first camera, more or less at Huntress. You built the EDR process insights part. And process insights, do you want to explain just real quick of like the scale and how, fast that data has to turn over in order for us not to be essentially a Formula One car on price?
Yeah, I mean, so we bring it in, and so with that, we're tracking every single process that runs on a machine. So we're tracking if you open a spreadsheet or you run the calculator, think of all the processes that are behind the scenes, all of that. We're tracking all of those. We're bringing it in. And because of how much data it is, we have to turn it over every 24 hours. Like we can only keep it in there hot for 24 hours. We keep it additionally in cold storage for a couple of days. We've kind of brought it down as we've started to learn more about how long we need it. But at least that way, if something happens, we can go fetch it from cold storage and rerun it and so we could rerun everything. But it's just so much data. I think the last time I looked, it was like 16 billion processes in a 24-hour period. But we've grown a lot of endpoints since then, so it's probably closer to 20 billion in a 24-hour period.
Yeah. So David's asking a really good question. He said, yo, I appreciate the dumbed down, explain it to me like I'm 5 example, but are you like building and mapping against these in MITRE? And so not only do we consider each of these under the hood, this is going to probably blow some minds on here. But the one thing about building a Lamborghini, for instance, is in a Lamborghini doesn't have the same brake quality as an F1 car. It can't brake to a nanometer of precision. So even the teams at Lamborghini decide some cases it's just not worth it. You can still drive fast enough. Like any one of us would love to go cruise in a high-end sports car. And the part that I'm getting at is while we do a lot of mapping against MITRE and common attacks, we actually argue internally it's more important what we say no to. What data is so verbose, so lukewarm, creates so much bullshit work that it's actually not worth storing. So I know that's a little bit different, but I wanted to give you, and by the way, this is the end of my call it primer. I wanted you to just to think about those. Not only, okay, we have different t-shirt sizes, we have 30-second reviews, and we have 3-minute investigations. We also, for instance, have lots and lots and lots of attack surfaces. So figuring out what to prioritize first is a headache. And then even how we search for it. And I'll tell you, right about the time that you decide, like, I got the bank secure, that's about the time that you get that Mike Tyson punch in the face, and then somebody Mission Impossibles you. They came in through the air duct underneath the all-seeing-eye. They never touched the pressure plate, and they still steal your stuff. So this is us like living and being honest of like security is imperfect. But when you build these in the right way and think about these things, oftentimes you can mitigate the vast majority of, headache. And that's, by the way, how Huntress, even though we are building a high-end sports car, we often kick the shit out of Formula One cars because not only are we affordable, it can be deployed everywhere, etc. So now that you're evangelized, you're thinking like a hunter or Huntress. I hope that helps a little bit. So Chris, I know you wanted to lead with some detection possibilities. Some of your team is over here already experimenting. There's some thoughts, there's some crystal ball. And so
yep.
Chat's killing me. I'm sorry for anybody watching this on replay. This is why you're supposed to join live. But Chris, walk us through some of the SIEM detections.
Yeah. So, we talked about, hey, what we think, where we want to go. The main thing that we do that is different than a lot of people do is we focus on attacker tradecraft. We focus on like, what are attackers doing? What are they being successful at? How are people getting wrecked? So there's a lot of opportunities. Like you can see here, CISA, the Cyber Defense Agency, they came out and they said like, hey, exposing stuff to the internet like firewalls and edge devices, attackers are taking these on, right? And it's a problem. So there's a lot of opportunities there. So the way we think about that is like, okay, what are attackers doing? What could we do? Right. So we've been thinking about these things of like something like a Firewall Insights. Now, right, this is just like brainstorming. This is early. This is not like, this isn't the roadmap yet. We're not, guaranteeing any of this, but this is kind of how we're thinking about it, right? Like what tradecraft can we identify with logs coming out of firewalls? Could we identify that edge device exploitation that CISA is talking about? Like, how would we identify it? Are attackers going to change rules? Are they going to add rules? Are they going to add users? I don't know. Could we detect rogue network devices, right? Like other things that are on the network that don't have a Huntress agent on them. They could just be like a different machine. It could be maybe like a printer, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's malicious, but it gives us some additional context and understanding. But like, is it useful from a security perspective? I don't know.
And I like the fact that you're asking that, is it useful? Because we've seen a lot of people, like, especially when you forget cybersecurity is changing so quick. I've seen a lot of like, Kyle, but I ran Nmap and you didn't see this or something along those. And it's like, whoa. Like that happens a million times a day. If you honestly want an alert that does this all day long, like, let me give you a free tool that can do it. Right. That is not a very useful thing in 2024. And part of it is being able to say, no, I'm not going to worry about these. But I'll tell you, like looking at the hard data and looking at how many 40 this or Sonic Wall that, it's just hard to update all the firmware all the time. And then there's sometimes bugs in the actual management interfaces. And to think that you honestly got them all right all the time, like that's just not possible. Even like the best engineers just get busy, or somebody ran it and it crashed during the middle of it and you thought that it did, but nobody trust and verified. Like accidents happen. So Chris, I'm really like personally, and I don't want to put bias on the audience too much, but knowing that my edge device is going to get popped one day and having something that could find like not the external reconnaissance, but somebody's now in my network doing internal reconnaissance. I would love to know if that's possible. And I kind of like that, you know, and it's a little bit different shape than some of the other stuff that we did, right? That's not really, you know, a front door. It's kind of more like what a security guard, right? Somebody that's there looking, their eyes peeled, going, all right, did somebody make it past the lock, but you know, is doing some shady stuff in there. So I'm a fan of this edge device exploitation.
Yep. So then finally, one of the things that we've seen, and this varies across, you know, whether you're talking about the different firewall manufacturers, but what we've seen from some of them, especially SonicWall, is that they will actually generate a log whenever a rule is created or updated or deleted. Can we use those logs to identify that and escalate it to say, hey, we saw a new rule was created to allow RDP to connect to this machine. Did you do that? Did you intend to do that? And if you did, is this something you want to leave forever? Or is this something you want to make sure is gone in an hour because you're just testing something, right? How many times have you or someone you know gone and added an exclusion to the firewall or something like that and forgot to undo it, right? Like it's common, right?
Yeah,
So
I just totally let them remote in, and I know that's not the greatest practice, but this is real life. I let them remote in, I got busy, and then you find out like 6 weeks later, like, oh my gosh, they've been brute forcing me for the last 300 hours straight, and it finally, you know, Rock U 2.0 came out and it destroyed me. Like,
yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So those are firewall types of things.
So, but remember, folks, this is ideas. Some stuff we're actually have experimented with. That's why we're giving you such shaped opinions of like when we've dove into some of this data and it's hot garbage. We are trying to influence you because we're seeing a lot of it. Other stuff, we want your opinion. And so we're worried about everything being on the internet, right? The amount of default creds, it still blows my mind. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we did something with this one. You want to give the rundown because I wasn't involved in the foundation software issue.
Yeah, so this was something that happened last weekend. It was a rapid response. So basically, someone in our SOC was detecting malicious activity, sending out reports, and they said, "Hey, wait a minute, timeout. I feel like I've sent several of these reports that are similar to similar companies." Right? Like it seems like a string of construction companies like had this problem over and over again. So when we took a step back and looked into it, we were like, oh yeah, this totally is. And what we found is the connection between all of them was this foundation accounting software. And as we started to look into it, we found that often it has these default credentials. And so attackers were scanning for them, you know, putting in the default credentials and getting in. So we actually identified not just one, but many of these attacks. And there's a whole bunch of news about it. But, you know, that was one of the kind of, again, what's that attacker tradecraft? People are trying to brute force. People are using RDP to get in. What can we do around that, right? And so this is where we've started to think about remote authentication monitoring. If you want to jump to the next slide.
Yeah. Because you got a couple of those on here, right?
Yeah.
RDP, not a surprise. Chris, if you don't mind, this is one of those best parts about us doing these like product labs is they're not selling, right? They're even hassling where or pointing our audience towards where you can find good resources. If the audience isn't looking at DFIR report, this is a team that does it for like nothing. This is a group that's totally worth donating to. And if you've never stumbled across DFIR report, what they're doing is they're taking all the like digital forensics from big incidents or incidents they're involved with, and they're giving the analysis of how it happened. So even though we internally do a lot of like red team, purple team, where like our offensive team is simulating, it's beautiful when we just test on both your data and other people's data that Huntress might not have had insight. So in case you're curious or maybe don't believe Sophos's data, go out there and look on DFIR report and look how many incidents, even the sexy ones coming in with like, a vulnerability that wasn't patched and they're using like a +1 day, not a 0 day, but a exploit for a patched vulnerability. And then they'll still end up walking out at the end of it with just malicious RDP. It's crazy, how often they either open it up or just walk in through the front door. So what else are you thinking, Chris, on remote authentication?
Yeah, so I think that's, we've got a couple here in terms of brute force, RDP, lateral movement, right? One of the things that we know from experience is that often users are not connecting to each other's machines, right? Debbie in finance is probably not connecting to Sam in operations computer. Doesn't make a lot of sense. This is not a thing that they do. So can we identify those kind of anomalies of like, hey, two users machines are just connected here? A lot of times what we see is that's used by lateral movement. So when an attacker gets in, they're looking to spread to as many of the machines as they can to gather whatever data they can before they drop ransomware. So can we detect things like that? But all this is again around like attacker tradecraft around remotely connecting to machines, brute force, RDP, lateral movement. So what can we do there?
Yep. And keeping it going, right? Their ideas are very broad. Remember my, trademarked earlier wall of logs that we shared? There's a lot of stuff that your existing logs can provide value. PowerShell scripts. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, should this go into EDR or should this go into SIEM? Should this go into other places? And there's a ton of data sources that could do. And then asking ourselves, is that question or is that data relevant? Like, this is hard. So I didn't know, Chris, if you wanted to go into, broad, but I think this is us saying of like, there's so much we could do here. And what we're looking for your help. And as we get ready to get to this next section is we want to hear from you. We want to hear where you're having pain points. We want to hear where maybe you've had an incident that got missed. Like even Huntress, we do a lot of what we call internally hypercare. That means when something was missed and it could be from our software, it could be from somebody else's software. Nothing is ever perfect. We do this internal hypercare process to understand the tradecraft. Is it something new? Why did it get by? How did it go? What new? Remember the bank? Did somebody just happen to come in through the air vent, dangling, etc., to steal the crown jewels? Like that's the stuff that we look for, and we're hoping to get some of this interactive. So I'm pretty good on the slide side right now, Chris. I know I'll come back to it, but are you okay if I just kill off the slides? They always kill the vibe for me a little bit.
Yep.
All right. So before we go into AMA and get a little bit interactive real quick, there's some questions. The first question was a silly one, but it's a good one. Eric just asked, yo, Kyle keeps bringing up Formula One in these calls. When are we going to see Huntress logo on a Formula One car? I hate to ruin anybody's dreams, but like I kind of would just rather put that sponsorship money in like a community event or like a free hacking event that we could teach people like better security. I think personally that builds like not only like better value for the community, but like it still builds leads when you go out there and do that stuff as well. So you'll probably never see a Huntress Formula One car.
Those sponsorships are like millions, if not tens of millions a year. So they're very expensive.
Other vendors in the space have done it though.
Yeah, Darktrace, CrowdStrike, Sendle One, right?
Yeah, DNS Filter I think has one too.
Yeah, they don't do Formula One. They do Indy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All righty. So some of the other questions, and I'll summarize just like, look, there's so many places to go. Where do you want to start? And by the way, some people like Darren threw out some extra ideas that was more in chat instead of questions like, hey, could we see things from VMware, vCenter? Could we see maybe other opportunities of like, what about finding these things that just, could be more like preventive? Could SIEM help with that? So I'm excited about this. And yeah, no Huntress Sports Arena coming either. I like going to sports events. I just like to use our money to benefit the community. And I just don't see how that's the same thing.
Yeah.
but I could make Huntress logos on bottles of bourbon. I think we could afford that one.
Yeah, we probably could.
All right, so let's open it up, Chris. You and I both were talking, gathering feedback. We'd love to go, and some of this is given like the awkward pregnant pause. That means waiting awkwardly long enough for folks to throw. But I'm curious, as we threw out data sources, where are you seeing maybe folks get wrecked? Where are you hearing from your peers? Or, oh man, I heard about this. And I know this is a touchy topic. I know that sharing maybe stuff that's happened to you or happened to close ones are like not a great feeling, but this is no joke. Like us going in and assuming that just because we have lots of data and we've built good products before, I mean, that literally doesn't guarantee we can continue building good products. Like good culture, healthy teams, constantly bringing in new ideas. Like that's how you actually iterate, and understanding yesterday's success doesn't dictate today's success. So, Chris, you had some folks asking things of like, hey, what about mobile? And I'll tell you, even though we're asking some of these questions in regards to SIEM, some people have started asking device control. Could you help take my like identity provider logs that not only have logs on each identity and how they're authenticating, maybe into apps they should and maybe in apps they shouldn't, but what about if somebody gets in my identity system, they actually tricked somebody to accepting a new phone registered. And maybe I didn't harden my actually identity provider, and I just allow somebody to auto enroll a new phone. This is a real thing that we're looking into. And I know that's not the same thing as probably what you're referring to, which is looking for malware on your phones, on your mobile devices, your tablets, etc. But in the world, as I led to, like threat actors are so viciously moving after where you store your data in SaaS apps that I think there is a very, very, very good chance that we have to solve the mobile device registration for two-factor probably in the next 12 to 18 months. And it's going to start going gangbusters. We're just already seeing this happen. And you've seen this in other big incidents too. The Uber incident, I think, had some of these that phones were registered once they got in, etc. Auto enrollment again, even just warning somebody. And some of the things we're actually asking is if SIEM turns out to be more detection and response based, well, shit, what are we doing for prevention? What even gets in front of this? And so I'm loving it. I'm loving it across the board. So Charles, I wish, and this is part of me not knowing how to use the platform probably good enough. I don't think they allow us to be able to bring anybody like live. We're trying to work this out to be able to have like pull folks onto the main stage and hope they're not nude. But if you just use it, I know I had to put that in your head, Chris. What type of VPN connections are you thinking, Charles? Because on our end, we do know VPNs are both wonderful. They're also really hard to find sprawl. Like we didn't realize how bad VPNs and all the other forms of like proxies, redirectors, etc. were until we started looking at people's Microsoft 365 connections. And we realized, oh my gosh, nobody has any clue how many of their just employees in their company are using VPNs that they didn't authorize. Like, when we first started seeing connections from like Hide My Ass, which is one of those like slightly shady, but sometimes, gray area VPNs that people use. It turned out it was actually like more like rogue, and shadow IT. It wasn't so much hackers, but not knowing that difference of, oh, this user logs in through Hide My Ass and this hacker knows that you have conditional access. So they VPN into the US using Hide My Ass, and now they're through there. We're really thinking about VPN. And so I'm reading everybody's chat right now, but if you all have more thoughts on like, are you thinking about, Charles, maybe the VPN app software itself getting installed on the endpoint or maybe mobile devices? Are you thinking of VPN traffic that we might actually see on the firewall? By the way, we're considering some of that. I'd love to know. What's your thought on VPN? I mean, I gave the easy one, the Google Workspace / Microsoft 365 one. Where do VPNs keep you up at night, or where do you know that we're seeing people currently being wrecked?
So one of the things I've heard is think about people's own VPNs, right? Like somebody connecting to like the company VPN and then having access to internal company network stuff. that kind of thing. So being able to track who's logging into the VPN, when did they log in with two-factor or not, assuming your VPN supports that, right? Things like that. So that's one that I've definitely heard of before.
I mean, how about Alan, who just in chat said, look, expand this, unwanted access, expand this thing into unwanted apps. And so, Alan, you're actually bringing up a really good topic. Like once we started looking a bit more at the Windows event logs, we started really realizing there's a lot of apps that get installed that don't just show up in add and remove programs. Obviously, malware is one of them. But just sometimes apps you don't want. A VPN client is a good example, or maybe somebody using Tor browser bundle. They're not really stealing any of your data. They're just doing shit that's bad hygiene. And so, Alan, some of the point that we're asking ourselves right now, could we build something or even use this SIM data, even if it doesn't become part of the SIM, because maybe sometimes it's just too wishy-washy, gray. It's not firm enough. There's a lot of folks that have rolled out flavors of allow listing software that we're starting to ask ourselves, could we build just like a managed SIM? Should we be building like a managed allow listing software where these things can connect, even where SIM data could help inform other roadmap or just roll into SIM? And that's some of the stuff where we're looking through. So I love your point that you brought that up, because unwanted apps, it sounds like a problem from yesterday, but like especially closer to Gen Z, where sometimes we're seeing data leave the networks on like Discord, stuff that you're not going to see that. You're not going to packet inspect that. It's over encrypted traffic over Discord where people are uploading them and you don't even know you have the Discord thick client on a laptop. Stuff like this is on our mind. So we got a lot of good points on VPN coming, considering VPN is often used to exfil stuff too. Hey, I VPN'd in, but you don't realize, well, you can have people VPN out as well sometimes when they get credentials. I'm curious, how are people feeling about data theft? Because this is some of the stuff we started even asking of, like, for instance, a firewall log. Certain brands of firewalls do a pretty okay job at being able to batch up, like, this is how much actual data just left in this small amount of time. And although we don't want to flood you with like 5 megs left, 5 megs left, let's be real. Sometimes knowing that you're pwned right as it happens, as opposed to knowing 2 days from now when you learn the hard way because they now ransomed you in addition to stealing your data, it's not great. But finding out you have stage 2 cancer is way better than finding you have stage 4. And so we're even asking, could SIM in the firewall logs, even if it's more reactive than truly, let's call it proactive instead of truly predictive, could we let you know, oh snap, out the firewall just had this large chunk of egress? And you might find out it's a misconfigured rule. You might find out somebody's torrenting data in your network. You might find out your entire SharePoint server was just exfilled. Like, these are crazy. But this is the stuff we're starting to ask as we get, I would say, a more modern level of IT and security leaders, where yesterday security leaders were like, if you've lost the data, you've lost it. Now people are realizing, like, nah, this is a spectrum. And yeah, I would love to find it when it's stage 0, but stage 2 is still better than death. So, okay, I'm going to take some time to read, Chris. Did you see anything in here? There's a lot.
Yeah, there was some discussions about like specifically OneDrive shares, but think about, you could expand that to like Google Drive, Box, Dropbox, any one of these like sites that people use to kind of host files and share them between each other. So we've definitely thought about that. I have no idea what the logs look like for that. We've actually been thinking about that more in terms of like a security posture management of like, could we, kind of scan through that stuff and say, hey, by the way, like this is bad or that's bad or don't do this. So, it's interesting. Some of these, I don't even know what all the possibilities are because we haven't seen the log data yet. So like, I don't know what gets logged, right? And that's really the key thing is like, if it logs good, useful stuff, then there's probably a lot we can do. If the logs just kind of suck, what are you going to do?
So Chris and I had a question that was somewhat loaded that we want to ask you all. And what we tend to see using, like, you remember, if any of you are using our, as the dog wanted to call out, the EDR service, we tend to manage the built-in Defender if you want us to build that, or if you have Defender for Endpoint, we're adding integrations that will ship at the end of this month for us to manage that for you at no extra cost. But there's a lot of folks that are like, I'm actually really happy with my Sentinel-1. So we are the EDR when they're just using Sentinel-1 for like next-gen antivirus. A lot of people that use Sentinel-1 Control. That's a good next-gen antivirus. It has no EDR, but it is a damn good. And what we're learning and what we're asking ourselves is, we don't think we can manage 9 different antiviruses. And to be honest, there's probably only 3 we would manage: Defender, CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1. We just have very good data across millions of endpoints. Those are the 3 that actually work. And they're not always the same first, second, and third. They rotate very frequently. But those are the 3 you should be using. I can tell you this confidently with mass amounts of data. But what if you are using something like, I got to have CrowdStrike on this one box? We probably can't manage your antivirus for you like we currently manage Defender. But should we be doing something like, I don't want to call it monitored. That's probably too embedded. Should there be like an alerted antivirus, something that can say, hey, we're pulling these logs in for you, and we want to let you know, even though that Sentinel-1 is on. Oftentimes when we see people get wrecked and it gets past Sentinel-1, it's not because that Sentinel-1 product's bad. It's not at all. It's because, like, oh man, it said it was quarantined, and 10 minutes later it was quarantined again. And then 8 minutes later it was quarantined again, and then it went silent. And then the team just assumes, oh, the hacker must have gone away. Internally, our team is going, oh no, why were they able to get quarantined and then quarantined again and quarantine? That means somebody was maybe living in memory and just one piece of their tradecraft. So we're really starting to ask, should we even open up logs of other antivirus? But being realistic, we really want to focus on an expert quality level. And that's the whole reason we built around Defender, is we just know the product well. We know it performs as good as any of the big 3, where they all have pros and all have cons. What does the team think? Should we even consider this? And I'll tell you, like Chris, I think we kind of ruled out, we probably wouldn't try to manage everything. But even some of our partners have come to us and it's like, Kyle, I am stuck for another, it's bundled with my RMM. I'm stuck for another 2 years on not Gravity Zone by Bitdefender, but maybe the OEM antivirus version of Bitdefender. It's not as good as Gravity Zone. I'm stuck for 2 years. Can you please give me some sort of help? You're paying and you would give this to me for free for Defender. Could you give me something along this lines for, I don't know, Gravity's or non-Gravity Zone? And so, okay, I'm seeing some people say S1. I'm seeing some people are just not chiming in. And so if you think about these, again, we haven't made decisions, but that's why this is so chill and casual. Like, this is the actual business logic where we have to look at our margins. We have to look at what's a quality product. And we also have to make sure, like, you've probably seen good vendors overextend themselves, try to be everybody's everything, and then they just do everything mediocre. And we're really trying to steer clear of that. So, okay. Man, there's some just good comments coming in here. CIS baselines, by the way, I know I skipped that a little bit. I love some folks even warning. And as we're pulling in more, we're actually thinking that oftentimes it's reactive when you're looking at logs. That means the behavior has already happened to get logged. But we're hoping that what we learn from you on SIEM, could we roll these into either, like, new products or enhancements to the existing products to better harden your environment? That goes back to the ounce of prevention of a properly configured network is worth a pound of cure. So a lot of people on S1 kind of bringing this up, and that doesn't surprise me. Like, we have like 200,000 plus endpoints that we sit side by side with Sentinel-1. It's a good product. Again, it's just the only shortfall most of our partners have with it is moving to complete is quite expensive, and then adding vigilance to it gets really expensive. And so you don't get EDR till you get complete, and obviously you don't get human management till you get vigilance. So we like that team. We like that product. We'd love to sit side by side it, but we understand why people move.
Yeah.
Did you see, is it Teresa? I'm assuming said, look, let's be real. Third-party antiviruses come and go. You are kind of right about Defender is not going anywhere. They have, we actually got to talk to the principal PM that runs all of Defender on the endpoint side of the house. And he told us that when it comes to total endpoints, they are up to of what they consider an endpoint. Remember, like technically Xboxes and stuff are also considered an endpoint? I think the answer was a billion with a B. We're over here like feeling like bosses that were like, we got multiple, 3 coming up on 4 million even endpoints that we could have. Microsoft's like, hold my beer, I got a billion. So Defender is not going anywhere. And man, it's part of the reason we're like, should we just stick with what's going to work?
I don't know. It's good feedback though. Love the feedback. Love to hear from folks to, see what people are interested in. Also what you're not interested in. That's another good one. You want to do a giveaway?
I think so, man. We've been going good. It's right at the top of the hour. We've had a lot of interaction. How do you choose this giveaway? Are you biased or do you?
I just have been watching chat, and I kind of scroll back through chat and see who's participating a lot.
Can we pick one each? Like, or do we do multiple giveaways? Who have you seen just bringing it?
I feel like Marcia.
Okay. So
Marcia
we've got
Jackson.
some overlap. Pick me. That goes really far. Good questions. And by the way, if anybody's recently won one of these things, like make sure to we can pass on the love. I mean, how many things Darren brought up? He brought up DLP. He brought up the V Center type stuff. He brought up some of the other piece. And so that seems really neat.
I was also those. Darren won last month. So.
Oh gosh. Okay. Who do you got number 2? Darren. What a can't win multiple months. Fine. I'm never coming back, Chris. I'm never coming back if I can't win each time.
There you go.
So what are you doing? Okay. If you took away my Darren vote for being interactive, Marcia definitely brought up some of the mobile stuff. So I get that. This is where I wish there was like an in-app, like randomly select. So I don't got to be the jerk that's coming through here.
I was thinking Mark W.
Go for it. Right. So, I'm curious, Darren, what did you get during the last giveaway? Was it swag? Was it gift cards? Was it like malware? What did we send you?
Malware. Yes. I think what they sent him was one of those little solo stoves, the little ones for doing like marshmallows that we gave out, and a t-shirt. I think that's what
man, I use the shit out of that solo stove. I do marshmallows on them, like s'mores.
Yeah, that's what they're for. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So next time we know we're going to get Chat GPT. Did you say it was Mark and Marcia? You biased towards the W's? All right.
Yeah, sure.
Goodness. Well, team,
so all you got to do is email swag@huntress.com. Let them know that you won, and they'll get your info and send you out some good stuff.
Yeah, we do put a lot of effort into some of this ridiculous swag. So again, appreciate everybody. If you can do us a solid with our big, sexy call to action at the end of this product and our many products in this environment gets better the more people you refer. If you had a good time, remember, you can just Google Product Lab Huntress, share that stuff. We are trying to get more of the diehards in here, more of the community folks, etc. And so Marcia and Mark, if you hit up swag@huntress.com, they will not only gather your information where to send it to you, they'll know where to send the phishing emails and malware. So no, I kid. Please don't sue us. All right, Chris, I'm ready to roll. How are you feeling?
Cool. Yeah, no, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Hour and 3 minutes in. This was awesome. I can't wait to see you next month. It'll be a spooky Halloweenish episode. So we'll see you there.
Cool.